All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here in the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. We're talking keys to victory, kind of part of our new format that we're doing. I know typically we do that on Thursday, but today we're doing it on Wednesday. We're going to be doing that moving forward. I'm excited for this new format. But keys to victory.
Especially since it was your idea.
What? What? Oh, come on! It was a good idea. It was a nameless good idea.
No, it wasn't.
And it was an
I like
Irish
to give credit where
breakdown.
credit is due. It was a good idea by Trevor. It's a good idea by Trevor.
Well, it is a good idea, and I'm glad that Brian signed off on it. We are now doing Keys to Victory on Wednesday, and I'm excited to talk about it. It's going to flow really well, and it's going to lead from the conversation that we just had about these matchups that matter. To the surprise of nobody, we're going to start to talk about the offensive side first. And we're going to talk about keys to victory on offense. And we're going to start with starting fast. But again, like it does every week, it has a little bit of a different meaning. Notre Dame's offense is coming off of a performance that was decent.
Yeah.
But starting fast is going to be big in this game. Really big.
Well, it ties into something that you and I talked about yesterday. Sort of the what to prove, what's at stake. You want to make sure that what we saw last week doesn't become a trend. You know, people say, well, they played well, but. Well, if they have to put a but in there, then they didn't play well. Just because they moved the ball at times doesn't mean they played well. If you scored 28 points and had 389 yards, but if you played well, you'd have had 41 points and 445 yards or something like that. No, you didn't play well. They made plays, but they didn't play well. There was mistakes up front, silly penalties, not even the bad play call, bad penalties that the officiating did. You had your own mistakes. You had your own holds and false starts and things like that. Missing open receivers not kind of jogging out of breaks and not accelerating and things like that. There was plenty of things that Notre Dame didn't do well. You've got to make sure this game is more like Purdue and Arkansas. And first and foremost, and we'll talk about some of the other things here in a second, Trevor, but the first and the foremost, the primary reason that needs to happen is this offense needs to make sure they don't get into a rut. Because sometimes a struggle like that can manifest into sort of like a slump, and as opposed to just being a bad game. And you need to make sure that this was just a bad, like an off game, not a slump where you start to play poorly for 2, 3, 4 games in a row. Remember Ohio State went through that last year. There was that kind of period in October, November, where their offense just seemed out of sync. Will Howard was missing throws that he had kind of made all year, and their offense just wasn't really kind of getting at the same kind of rhythm that we saw. They scored 21 points against Nebraska. They scored 20 points against Penn State. Their 45 points against Purdue was a very sloppy game. You only had 433 yards against Purdue. Like, it's going to kind of sound funny, but you having only 433 yards against Purdue is an off game for your offense. When you look at what Purdue was doing, everybody else, Notre Dame had 578, Wisconsin had 589, Illinois had 556, Penn State went for 539, Indiana went for 580, 582. Everybody else was over 7-8 yards per play, and Ohio State was at 6.6. So, like, they just were in that kind of that funk, Trev, where they just weren't themselves. They scored 31 points and only had 420 yards against Northwestern. They only had 316 yards of offense against Indiana. They only had 252 yards against Michigan. Like, sort of like that Nebraska game coming out of the loss to Oregon, like, their offense didn't recover till the Tennessee game. Like, truly recover till the Tennessee game. And that was with Will Howard and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. So just because it was a bad game doesn't mean that it's not going to bleed into other games and become a bit of a pattern that you got to figure out how to get out of. That's why I think a fast start in this game is important, because, like, put that game behind us. Because here's my fear, Trevor, is if CJ comes out early and he misses some throws. We saw it with Riley last year too. When Riley had some missed throws early, it started getting his head. And he starts, like, I think the Miami of Ohio game is a perfect example. Like, he threw one of the ugliest passes I've ever seen on a little, just a little screen play to Cooper Flanagan. And it's the play that Cooper got hurt on the first time. And you could see it was so in his head. He was like trying to put the ball out there to make sure that he could get it out there. And of course he sails it. And you're like, it can get in your head. I mean, professional athletes will get the yips And I'm not saying that's going to happen to CJ. But that's why a fast start's important. And where it comes from is when you miss a couple throws, you're like, dude, I don't miss that throw. And then you've missed it again. You're like, what's going on with me? And you start pressing. You could see that against Boise. CJ was pressing on some of those throws where he was trying to make a perfect throw. Instead of, dude, just relax, just rip it, man. You've been doing this your whole life. You throw one of the best balls in college football. Just relax and let her rip. And that's why I think a fast start could kind of settle him down. Like, dude, that game's behind us. It's no big deal. He's a younger player, so he doesn't have as much experience kind of coming out of those games. It's really his first game as a passer that you're just like, he wasn't really on. He was pretty good throwing the ball against Miami. His decision-making wasn't great, but when he threw it, it was a thing of beauty. This was his first kind of off game. How does he kind of come out of that? And I think a fast start puts that in the rear view and lets CJ know, dude, you're fine. And then lets the rest of the offense know, CJ's fine. Let's go out and rip this team up. So I think that's the number one priority to a fast start. And then there's obviously the other aspects of how it impacts the defense and NC State and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's something that is good because it'll help the offense say, hey, this isn't going to become a trend. We're shaking that off. We're coming out here against NC State, and we're gonna bury them.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, last game it was almost I talked about it last night on IB Nation Sports Beat, but the parody is insane, and I know you guys talked about it a little bit upon further review. It's just about how, last year, Game 5, the offense had to show the defense, hey, you guys don't have to hold every opponent to 10 points for us to walk away with a win. Well, in Game 5 of 2025, the defense showed the offense, hey, you don't have to score 50 points every week for us to be in it and for us to win convincingly. A fast start is going to put the minds at ease of both the offense and the defense. Yes, agree completely that it's going to get CJ in the rhythm. It's what you need. Boise State was the first game in 4 games that they didn't score in the opening possession?
Yeah, the last time was Texas A&M, right?
Yeah. So it's one of those where it's like when your offense starts to cook, this offense is very rhythm-based. Now, they showed positive of not starting fast against Boise State is they showed that they're able to overcome some things. They're able to overcome some penalties and just a weird flow of the game. But you don't want to put yourself in that position where you're going to have to continually prove that every single week. And so fast start's going to be absolutely imperative. And if this group is able to start fast, Brian, it's a really good segue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say the other thing, too, is I don't know that this is an offense that you want to have your defense have to hold them to under 20 points. This isn't Boise's offense. This is a much different type of offense. And this is the type of offense where if your defense does not make the changes permanent that we saw last week, if you score 7 points in the first 1.5 quarters, you could find yourself down 24-7 as opposed to being down 7-6. And so I think there's also that element to it as well, is you don't want to fall behind early. If the defense struggles early with NC State, you need to be able to match them with scores until the defense can figure it out. Because the one thing we have seen from this defense is, for the most part, they've been better in the second half than they are the first half. And I think that was also true last week. So you want to make sure that you're still you either have a small lead or you're only a field goal behind when you go into the second half, and the defense is able to make some adjustments. So I think there's that aspect of it too. But if your defense is playing well and you can come out and start fast, to your point, Trevor, is now you let the defense know, like, hey, guys, we're fine. We're good. Last week was an anomaly. If you guys keep doing what you're doing, we won't lose another game. And, like, ever, if we can both play to the best of our ability. And I think that's important too. And the crowd and all that. But I really think this NC State team is going to come into this game with a lot of false confidence. The problem with false confidence is if you don't let them know right away that, guys, you aren't us, that false confidence becomes real confidence. But the flip side is if you come out and punch them in the mouth right away, that false confidence becomes doubt. And that's how you can bury a team like this. I'm not saying they're going to, but I'm saying that's why a fast start is very important.
100%. False confidence can go one of two ways. It can either be Clemson 2023 or Arkansas 2025. And that's what's at stake at this game, for sure. But a fast start.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Trevor. Because that's exactly what they did to Clemson in 2023 is they let a reeling team get confidence early, and all of a sudden, confidence-wise, they started looking like old Clemson.
Yep.
And you couldn't do anything about it. But if you'd have jumped on them earlier, Clemson was going to quit, and that game was going to either be what it was, or it was going to be a blowout for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And it all was about the start. And could you start fast? Yep, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. That's a great point.
It's one of those that you got to be able to nix it real quick. And if you're able to start fast, it leads into our key to victory number 2 for this offense. So you have to make NC State think and communicate. We've talked really the last couple of days about how this is just an undisciplined defense. And one thing that I love that Notre Dame did against Boise State early is they played with a lot of tempo. A lot. I mean, you and I were up in the press box and we looked at each other and said, yo, they're going fast.
The third game in a row they've done that. They did that against Arkansas early in the game, and they did that a little against Purdue. I mean, you couldn't tell in the first series if they were doing that because it's one freaking play. It's like you come off the bench. I don't know what kind of tempo you sprint to the line and go, but they throw a 66-yard bomb on the first play. But there were times against Purdue where they would kind of start pushing the tempo a little bit. They did that against Arkansas. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this, Trevor. And number one is that this is a bigger D-line. This is kind of a D-line that's like Arkansas, that's like Purdue, in that they kind of start 3 big guys as opposed to like 2 true tackles and an end. They're more, they're more geared towards, 3 bigger guys as opposed to there's times I've seen where they'll have, 3 guys in the field that are 260 plus. They'll kind of bump to an odd front. Sloan will kind of bump outside, or he's more kind of like a Viper type of player, and he'll drop into coverage. So they're going to play more big boy football than trying to be like really fast, twitchy edge rushers. They're going to put bigger guys in the field. We talked about, Brandon Cleveland is 6'4", 315. You got Chaz Wallace is 308. They'll play Josiah Victor, who's 312. Isaiah Shirley's a younger kid with a smaller body type. And so either one of those 2 things, Travali Price is only 285. You either have a smaller guy that you want to beat up or a bigger guy that you want to make run. Either way, pushing the tempo impacts both of those. So I want to get Brandon Cleveland gassed. I want to get him having to, defend 5 plays in, 2 minutes of real life time. You know what I mean? Like, I want to push the tempo. But the other part of that too, Trev, is you talked about the lack of discipline. And what we've seen from this NC State team is, like you and I were talking earlier today, so it's wild because you'll watch 4 or 5 plays in a row and you're like, dude, that's good defense right there. And then the next play, they'll just not cover someone. Or the next play, we were laughing about this run they had, I think it was against Virginia, where they just slanted the D-line to the boundary and they just took everybody else to the field, and the running back just cuts back and there's like nobody backside, and he rips off a big run. You're like, I have no clue what they were doing. They don't have a clue what they were doing. And so the more you move, the more you go with tempo, and then the more you move pre-snap, motion shifts, overload alignments, like Notre Dame has done like a trio overload. So they'll put 3 receivers to the right, and instead of having the tight end backside, they'll bring the tight end over. There's things you'll do where they'll get misaligned. You're going to snap the ball and they're still communicating. They're not sure who to defend. And the more aggressive you get with NC State, I was about to say Boise, with NC State, the more likely they are to make a mistake, which with this offense for Notre Dame, whether it's Love, Price, Greathouse, Pauling, Fields, Faison, KK Smith, Logan Saldate, Micah Gilbert, Eli Raridan, you can name anybody. They've got home run hitters all over the field to where if they make a mistake, it's 6. And so you want to put them in those things. You want to get them on their heels. You want to get them communicating and shit. I mean, they look a lot like Notre Dame earlier in the season on defense, where a simple fast motion has 11 dudes doing something different, and you're communicating in the offense. The offense is snapping the ball, and you don't know what to do. It's very similar, and so that's why I look at this, Trev, and I'm like, I think that if you can come out of this game, and if you can get them moving around and communicating and talking, because look, you just do not want to let them just line up and get their calls and their checks in and have a beat on what you're doing. You want them running all over the place. You want them moving, thinking, talking. If you do that, you're going to gash them with big plays. So it's not so much about being aggressive. That's just this team is aggressive. I mean, I don't even really have that mindset now. I had the concerns going into Purdue and in Arkansas. You and I both expressed those concerns about, is Marcus Freeman going to kind of pull the reins back? And no, he didn't at all. When they jumped out to a 21-7 lead, it wasn't like, okay, guys, now ground and pound and run no, it was like they went right after him again. They're up 28-7. They run a freaking reverse. It's very obvious that Marcus Freeman has basically said, Denbrock, go do what you do. Now, he'll still have his say and do things, and that's not like he doesn't have any authority over the offense. He's the head football coach. He can say whatever he wants. But after what we saw against the last three opponents, I'm kind of over is Marcus Freeman going to do that thing? And if he does it, then we can address it, but I'm not worried about it anymore. So the aggressiveness is not an issue. It's more so, but are you going to come out and get them on their heels with how you go about your business, with your pace and with your movement? And if they do that, then the aggressiveness is going to result in a lot of big plays, a lot of yards, and a lot of points.
Next key to victory, Brian, that we're going to talk about for the offense is mixing up the run game and then having to stick to it. Mike Denbrock this season has done a pretty good job of mixing up the run game. That was one thing that we highlighted with him against Purdue, against Arkansas. And so this is another game where they're facing a different type of defensive front, and they're going to have to be creative with how they run the football.
Trev, when I look at this, so the one game that he came out of the NC State game or the A&M game thinking dude, there was just not a lot of creativity in the run game. They kept running mid-zone, snap after snap after snap. There just wasn't a lot of creativity. Since then, to your point, they've been very good in that regard. And it's needed. This is a lot like the Arkansas game. A lot of the things that you and I have to say about this NC State defense are very similar to what we were talking about Arkansas, right? Big D tackles that you want to get going, vulnerable on the secondary, athletic guys, but vulnerable on the secondary, linebackers that you can get in bad spots. You want to move it's very similar to that. And one thing that Notre Dame did a great job of against Arkansas is they really mixed up how they attacked Arkansas with their run game. It wasn't just, you couldn't just line up and say, play the mid zone all game, so when they step this way, you got to go that way. They did a great job of doing different things to give them problems. I mean, they ran mid zone 11 times against Arkansas. They ran their duo inside zone 8 times. They ran counter 3 times. They ran an outside zone for a big play. They ran 2 toss cracks. They ran their kind of their double pull scheme. And it's they really had Arkansas on their heels because what was happening was when they see blocking down, you're thinking, okay, it's so if you see the line blocking down and Jeremiah Love step this way, it looks like mid zone. But all of a sudden you're running duo. And so you cut that sucker back as opposed to the stretch. Or, you see gap down and you're thinking, oh, they're going that way because it's mid zone. And then all of a sudden the guard and the tackle are pulling around and kicking out. I mean, you're running a quick outside play. I would love to see a jet action in this game just to mess with them a little bit. And this is the game. This is the game. We're talking about yesterday. Somebody asked about this in the mailbag. This is the game that I want to see 21 personnel where Jeremiah Love's going in a jet motion. You hand it off to him the first time. And then the next time you do that, you're flashing that, and then running the ball right inside to Jadarian Price. I think that's the kind of thing you could just really give NC State some major problems with. Or you could do it the other way around. Just have Jeremiah flash fake a couple times, just hand the ball off to Jadarian. And then they're like, oh, they're not going to give him the ball. And then you throw a bubble screen to him or something like that. Or you motion him out and you throw a little now screen to him. Or you hand it off to him the 3rd or 4th time he does it. And then they're not thinking about it. However you do it, you could really get them on their heels. And this is another way of doing that. So the motions and the shifts kind of get them on their heels and then go at them, but mix up how you go at them. Mid-zone out, like last week, even the mid-zone outside zone was a bit of a unique mix-up, and they ended up rushing for, what did my number say, Trev? So this is, again, one of those things that you want to be a premium board member because you get this full data breakdown, but they ran outside zone 7 times for 126 yards against Boise State. They had only run outside zone, I think, 8 times the whole year coming into that game. And they only ran it once against Arkansas. And that was on the 3rd and 7 on the first drive of the game. And they ran that after they had done something on the previous 3rd and 7 that they didn't get, and they had the offsetting penalties. So I think those are things that that if you can have a nice mixed up run game, who's getting the ball, the action, the tempo, then you're going to be able to find some success. Because I think running the ball is very important in this game. And NC State's the kind of defense where they will kind of shut you down 50. If you watch the UVA game and you're at first you're like, dude, I don't know if UVA is going to be able to run the ball on them. It's like 2 yards here, 1 yard minus here. Then all of a sudden, boom, 39-yard touchdown run. Boom, 66-yard touchdown run. Boom, 40-yard gain. Because they're very inconsistent. And so you may not come out right away and just be gashing them. It may be like the Arkansas game, because we pointed this out too, Trev. I think 4 of their first 5 carries against Arkansas were minuses from an efficiency standpoint. Because Arkansas was committing so, but they stuck with it. They started mixing it up, and next thing you know, it's gashing them here, gashing them there. And then this, from the kind of late first into the second quarter, you were just ripping them apart with the run game. And then that opens up the pass game and some of those things. So I think that a balanced rushing attack is something that could create some major problems for NC State. But if you just line up and run mid-zone at them all day, you're playing right into their hands, because you're just going to be running right at the Brandon Cleveland all game long. And I don't know that that's necessarily the best strategy.
The one thing I will say is FanDuel absolutely thinks that Notre Dame is going to have some success running the football, because you go and you look at what some of these numbers are. Like I said, the player props came out today. Jeremiah Love's over-under set at 99.5, and Jadarian Price's over-under set at 73.5. Unfortunately, Vegas caught up pretty quick on really setting back the odds or really raising the odds for Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price anytime touchdown. For Jeremiah Love to get in the end zone, it's minus 600. And then for Jadarian Price to get in the end zone, it's minus 250. So basically all that means is if you bet $10 on Jeremiah Love to score a touchdown, you'll win $1.67. So he's one of those that's just starting to become, death taxes. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price find the end zone.
So. I mean, in fairness, he's only been kept out of the end zone once all year, or once in his last 2 years when in a game where he wasn't injured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's Miami this year is really the only in the last 2 years, the only game where a non-injured Jeremiah Love was kept out of the end zone was Miami this year. And he would have scored if CJ would have handed him that mid-zone play instead of pulling and throwing it outside. He would have had one in that game too. So, but yeah, death taxes and Jeremiah Love scoring a touchdown. Yeah.
I'll have to find a way to put that on a T-shirt or something. But yeah, man, it's the odds aren't in your favor. Like I said, I guess if you have like $10,000 sitting around and you want to put it on a Jeremiah Love anytime touchdown, then you might be, it might be worth your while. Yeah. But if you're like me, you don't really need that $1.67 all that bad. But yes, I do think Notre Dame is going to have a lot of success on the ground if, to your point, they're able to mix up their run game.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing Notre Dame's offense is going to have to do, fourth key to victory for us, Brian, is to be able to hit the deep shots. Mm-hmm. NC State secondary, we talked about this yesterday. NC State's defense is weird, and they have talent specifically in the front 7 of their defense. But you start to talk about the back end of this defense, and that's where they've struggled a lot. This is also going to be a good kind of litmus test for CJ Carr to see if, hey, have you put that Boise State game behind you? CJ Carr has done he's done a really good job of taking deep shots and hitting deep shots throughout the season, but against Boise State, he went 1 of 7 on passes 20 yards or longer down the field. Notre Dame's going to have to be able to take some shots and hit them over the top against NC State.
Yeah, and look, their corners are not bad. Their corners are solid players. They have some safety issues, I think, in coverage, and they have some linebacker issues, but their corners are decent players. Devin Marshall this season has given up, look at PFF, he's given up 14 catches on 26 targets, 152 yards. He hasn't allowed more than 45 yards in a game. That was against Duke. He can be beat. I'm not saying he can't, but he's a solid player. Last season at NC State, Devin Marshall allowed 52% completion rate, only gave up 297 yards all season. And so, he's a solid player, gave up 3 touchdowns, but had 2 picks and 8 breakups, according to Pro Football Focus. He hasn't had any hasn't allowed a single touchdown all year. Matter of fact, their corners have not allowed a touchdown all season in the past game. They've only allowed 8 touchdowns in 6 games throwing the football. And then Jamel Johnson, who is, again, solid player. He's transferred in from Temple. This is his 3rd school, I believe. He's been targeted 23 times and given up 12 catches for 146 yards. He has not had given up a touchdown either. Now, neither of them had an interception yet. But, he's a guy that I think is a little bit more vulnerable. And especially early in the year, he got up 71 yards receiving against East Carolina and then 51 against Virginia. But in the 4 games since, he's allowed 0 catches on 1 target, 1 catch on 1 target for 12 yards, 0 catches on 5 targets against Virginia Tech. And then he also only gave up 1 catch on 3 targets against Campbell. Now, here's where I think Notre Dame should kind of look to feast a little bit is they have another corner that plays a little bit. And he's been solid so far this year, but Brian Nelson will also rotate in a corner. He's number 7. When he's in the game, I would definitely look to take shots on them. But look, they're good players. They're good players. Having said that, they're not as good as the Notre Dame receivers. And when you get in one-on-ones, you've got to throw accurate balls, and then the Notre Dame receivers are going to have to do a better job of making plays. I think this is a game we haven't seen the go ball be as effective the last 2 weeks. They didn't really throw it last week. They threw 1 that I can think of, and that was through a PI. Did they throw any other goes last week? I don't think they did. They threw post slot fades and things like that, but they, obviously, and against Arkansas, it was kind of hit or miss. They hit some, missed some. That's been a throw that CJ's nailed. I would love to see that this week. I think to the field, especially, there's times when they'll go press to the field with a single high safety. And that's a play where either a go route to your Z or a slot fade to your slot needs to be a go-to there when you get that look, even if you're checking into it. I think that's a great opportunity there. Eli Raridan's going to have some opportunities and matchups to throw the ball down the field. You got to call it, and CJ's got it. You've got to protect it, and CJ's got to hit it because there are, to your point, Trev, there will be some big-time downfield opportunities for the pass game this week. And you're going to have to hit those shots because if CJ if what we see from CJ Carr is more like the last 2 weeks as opposed to the first 3 games, then teams are going to say, okay, he's not hitting those shots as much. We're going to put more resources in the box to stop the run. But if he can come out and hit a couple of those shots early in the game, like I think he can, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we can't load the box. We have to play him more straight up. And that plays right in Notre Dame hands. So, and it could be backs out of the backfield, whatever the case may be, but there's going to be some shots to hit the ball down the field. You can't force it because there's other times they'll play like this weird, like diamond, cover 3-ish type of thing. It's like, it's almost like a Tampa 2 where the guy's already back there. It doesn't even look like, it looks more like 2 than it does 3. And when they're doing that, okay, there's not going to be shots, but that's where you can run at them and where you can hit screens on them. And I mean, they mix up a lot of different stuff, and I think they do too much coverage-wise, honestly. I think they should play more basic and this is actually a pretty athletic defense in certain spots. Sean Brown's very athletic. I think Ronnie Royal's a pretty darn good athlete. The corners are good athletes, and they started a nickel against Campbell that I think is a better player than what they had been starting before. So they had Assad Brown was starting a nickel. And they started a kid against Campbell, Javon Bailey, as I think that's how his name is pronounced, B-A-L-Y. And I'm just like, he's a lot more fluid. He's a lot twitchier. He was really more sticky in coverage. That was Campbell. But, but he's a good athlete. But they do so much that their guys are thinking so much, they can't just go run. That's what I think they should do. But even then, they're going to have problems with the one-on-one matchups against Notre Dame. So when you can do things to get into those one-on-ones, and then you got to throw it, protect it, and call it, protect it, and throw it and catch it. And if they do that, then I think NC State's going to be in big trouble.
Final key to victory on offense, Brian, and I love this key to victory. It's impact in the screen game. And you've been pretty spot on the last couple of games when you've mentioned Notre Dame's ability to hit some big plays in the screen game. You called it against Arkansas. I do remember that. You 100% called it then. So I love this key to victory. Notre Dame is going to have some opportunities in the screen game. Walk us through why this is the 5th key to victory for this offense.
Well, it goes back to the big play thing, and it goes back to going at what I think NC State's going to do to try to stop Notre Dame. I don't think NC State's just going to sit back and say, bring it on. I think they're going to know, they're going to watch Boise, and they're going to say, yeah, Notre Dame hit some big plays, but they created more mistakes from Notre Dame. They created more misses by heating up the pressure. And they will bring safety fires, they will bring nickel fires, they'll bring linebacker blitzes, they'll slant, they'll stunt. They do a lot of things up front. Again, I think sometimes too much. And what can happen is if you have a well-designed screen and a well-executed screen, you can hurt them for big plays. Tight end screens are something that I definitely could see being a big part of the game. I think there's times Virginia would just they did it more out of an RPO, but they would see against the softer coverage, they just pull it and throw the now screen, just throw it out. Now screen just means it's like now, just go. Slip screens maybe. I don't know that slip screens are going to be as effective out of the backfield because I would imagine they're going to key on Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price a little bit more. And it may be more effective with Jadarian than it would be with Jeremiah if they're going to play it. But like then you have the bootleg throwback screen that you had against Arkansas. I could see a play like that opening up because I called that exact screen. But the tight end screen could be one that we see this game. The tunnel screen could be one. Because if you catch them, if they're not blitzing, the tunnel screen won't really go anywhere. That's fine. It's no different than running an inside zone or a mid zone to get stuff for 2 yards. But if you catch them in a blitz, it's going to go. And that's the thing I like about it is, even like an angle screen out of the backfield, a tunnel screen from the boundary. I mean, if you can catch them in a blitz, if your preparation tells you that they're a heavy blitz team in this situation, or whether it's against a formation, whether it's against a look, or whether it's a down and distance, then hey, you can catch them in one of those screens and it can go. And so I think that's a big part of it too, because what that does, Trev, is it now says, hey, you better back off or we're going to hurt you. And a lot of times Mike Denbrock has waited to really go to a screen game till deeper into the game. Like I think the throwback screen against Jeremiah Love was their fifth touchdown of the game. The touchdown to Jeremiah Love that was a similar play to what they ran against Louisville last year. Actually, almost the same exact play they ran against Louisville last year for touchdown, but that was fourth quarter. I think these are things where I'd like to see them kind of go to this stuff early. And if you can hit a couple of them, it's going to say to NC State that you blitz at your own peril. And so this also kind of goes with the hit the deep shots. If you're going to come up and put extra hats in the box, and I'm hitting Malachi on one play, Eli down the field on another play, Greathouse on the slot fade, or whatever the case may be, and then I gash you with a couple screens, all of a sudden you're going to say, well, how bad do you really want to blitz us? And then if that forces them to then back off, then that's when the run game takes over.
Definitely opportunities to take advantage of in the screen game. I agree with you completely. Brian?